The lighthouse keeper. On a steep cliff in the middle of the vast ocean, there is an ancient lighthouse that still shines day and night, guiding ships through storms. The keeper of that lighthouse is Mr. Lamb, an old man. His hair has turned white over the years. For more than 40 years, he has been attached to this lonely job, considering it a mission of his life. Every night, when the cold wind blows through each crevice of the rocks, when the waves crash against the rocks below, creating endless murmuring sounds, Mr. Lamb still diligently checks the light, cleans each magnifying glass so that the light can reach as far as possible. He understands that just 1 minute of carelessness, just one time letting the light go out, who knows, somewhere out there, a ship could get into trouble in the dark night. More than 40 years ago, Mr. Lamb was also a young man, carrying within him the desire to reach far to conquer the ocean. He was once a sailor on a large ship, passing through many strange lands. But then one fateful night changed his whole life. That was when his ship encountered a big storm, crashed into the reefs, and sank into the sea. In the midst of life and death, he was saved by a former lighthouse keeper. That person, an old man with white hair, threw a rope into the sea, pulling him up from the abyss of the ocean. From that day on, Mr. Lamb decided to give up the sea. Instead, he chose to become a fire keeper, a lighthouse keeper. One day, a big storm came unexpectedly. The waves rose like giant walls of water. The wind howled fiercely. Mr. Lamb knew that, in times like this, the lighthouse became more important than ever. He tried to keep the light on, despite the cold winds cutting into his skin. In the middle of the stormy night, he suddenly saw in the distance a small ship swaying, being swept away by the fierce waves. He rushed to the edge of the cliff, using his signal light to signal the ship to stay away from the reefs. But then, amid the howling winds, a faint cry for help rang out. He strained his eyes to look down and saw a man who had been thrown off the ship, floundering in the middle of the ocean. Without hesitation, he ran to the rope and life buoy, then threw himself into the abyss. His old body was squeezed by the cold water, but he did not stop. With all his strength, he swam to the struggling man, pulled him into his arms, and tried to bring him to shore. Both were exhausted when they reached a small rocky beach near the lighthouse. The man was a young sailor, his face pale with cold and fear. When he regained consciousness, he grabbed Mr. Lamb's hand, his voice trembling. "If it weren't for you, I would have died in the middle of the ocean." "Thank you." Mr. Lamb just smiled gently, his eyes filled with peace. "I just do what needs to be done, young man. My job is to keep the light on and help the ships reach shore safely." The storm passed. The sailor was picked up by a rescue ship, but he never forgot the old man who risked his life to save him in the storm that night. Many years later, when he became an experienced captain, every time he saw the light from the lighthouse in the distance, he remembered Mr. Lamb, the silent lighthouse keeper who sacrificed his whole life for others. But then, time passed, modern technology developed. Many automatic lighthouses were installed, and the lighthouse keeper's job was gradually forgotten. One day, there was a transfer order. The local government decided to stop operating the lighthouse and replace it with an automatic warning system. Mr. Lamb received a notice that he would have to leave this place. On his last night at the lighthouse, he sat quietly by the light, looking out at the sea, where he had watched every passing ship for the past 40 years. He was not sad for himself, but he was worried that there would be stormy nights when machines could not replace the human heart. That night, another storm came. Mr. Lamb knew that this was the last time he could do anything. He went to the shore again, holding a signal light, trying to guide a small ship away from the reefs. But this time, there was no one beside him, no rope or life buoy. He walked slowly towards the lighthouse, lighting it once more, before the light melted into the dark night rain. The next morning, when the storm had passed, people found Mr. Lamb sitting quietly against the stone wall, his eyes closed, as if he were sleeping. The lighthouse is still shining. Its light not only guides the ships, but also symbolizes humanity, perseverance, and the spirit of sacrifice. Mr. Lamb's story does not have any resounding achievements. It is not recorded in books, but the light from the lighthouse he guards has saved countless lives. Human morality is not always expressed in great things, but sometimes it is simply keeping a light shining in the storms of life. Thank you for listening to the whole story. Please like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. See you in the next video.